Welcome to Fragging with me, Zaccubus, and this is lesson 2 on how to aim, and this is with projectile weapons. Now, when you're watching this and you're probably thinking, where's the bio rifle? Well, it's not included in this lesson as the bio rifle is absolutely useless. It's loud, it's noisy, it aims secondary fire like the flak cannon, so that kind of teaches you how to use that anyway. And the first fire is spray and pray and hope that you kill something. But, you know, any other projectile weapons in this game I cover fairly extensively. So hence I have made these nice annotations so you can time skip to wherever you like. But enjoy the content. If you do like it, remember to comment, subscribe, dislike, whatever. Go nuts in the comment section below. But thanks for tuning in. Now, the main differences between hit scan aim and projectile aim is where actually you hold your crosshair for most of the time. So as you move around a map with, say, your shock rifle here, you're always kind of center screen. You're always at chest height, head height, especially with the sniper rifle. But your aim really doesn't change that much. You're always in that sort of same center scaling position on the center of your map. Whereas when you're using projectile weapons such as the rocket launcher and the flak cannon, you aim significantly different. You're always arced downwards. You're always aimed at the floor at some point. You should never be aiming center because the distance and the travel time is just not logical. You're not going to land any damage. You want to land splash damage. You want the explosions to hit people. You don't want to hit them directly. It's always nice if you do. It's just a bonus, essentially, if you do hit them directly. But really, we want to be aiming towards the ground most of the time, especially with the rocket launcher. The flak has some exceptions. But you'll notice as you travel through a map, instead of having this static sort of hit scan aim, which is always center screened, with rocket launcher, your aim will dramatically change throughout the map. On different maps, when you travel through them, after time, you'll instinctively sort of learn to place your aim as you go through a doorway, that this is the most logical place to put it. As you enter a larger room, that you want to be sort of aiming towards the end of the map. As you don't know where your opponent is, this is just instinctively programmed into your brain after a while, after you play enough games. And as I come closer to this doorway, again, I'm sort of aimed downwards, unless I know that he's on the other side of the map, whereas I will be sort of aiming towards that side of things when I spam across there. It's quite odd, really, that your brain just naturally picks this up after a while. But you always want to be aiming at that floor at all times, angled with a rocket launcher towards the floor. Whereas the flak cannon, it is a little bit different. Especially at long range, you can aim it centered like you would with hit scan. It's usually quite useless, but depending on the environment and the situation, it can vary dramatically. Aiming center with primary flak is still always good. You'll probably see this majority of the time, but if there's a scenario where you can actually use it against a wall or some form of terrain, then you can get the added bonuses of that sort of bounce effect that you can have with it. Now, when aiming with secondary flak, it's very similar to what I'd use with rocket launchers, sort of aiming towards the floor, between medium and close range. At long range, because of its natural huge arc that it has, it's a little bit different. It just takes time and a lot of gameplay to really know when and how to predict your arcs. It's just a practice weapon. Flak cannon, by far, is the hardest weapon to master in the Unreal Tournament series. It can feel incredibly random sometimes. Sometimes it can feel like you hit everything. It's just one of those guns that can really change the pace of the game. But if you can somewhat master some of its features, you will be hated for sure. Now, when learning to aim with rocket and secondary flak, we always want to be aiming at our opponent's feet 90% of the time, depending on the environmental choices that you have at the time. But the reason why we do this is for two reasons. One is to always guarantee some form of damage, as direct rockets are not always the best solution. You're more than likely going to miss them, but splash damage will always guarantee us some damage, as you can see here. But also, the main other reason is to knock our opponent flying in the air, making it incredibly easy to predict on where they're going to be landing, and so we can follow up with more damage. It discombobulates them. They're going to be panicked. They're going to want to get out of the situation as fast as possible, and they're going to do even more predictable movement, and they're going to walk into environments that you're going to be able to use your rocket launcher or your flak cannon against. So it always works out best if you aim for the feet. Lots of FPS players always like to turn down their graphical settings to get a clearer image, to get smoother FPS, to not be blinded by all the shiny features that a game offers. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's one little detail that I always like to turn up, and that's the shadow quality. So in this case, once you have it on medium, you can actually see a shadow underneath the player model. Now this is a great reference point for using your rocket launchers and your flak cannons. It shows you where to aim, and when you knock somebody into the air, you're going to be able to follow them very easily. But there is a slight problem at the moment, as you can see, is that if you walk into a shadowy area, you no longer see the shadow anymore, which is slightly annoying, but hopefully later builds that's going to be fixed and we'll be able to see shadows upon shadows as it should be. But it's still great in those well lit areas for aiming your rockets and knowing where to predict where somebody's going to land. Now the hardest thing to learn with projectile aiming is knowing when to take your shots and how much distance you need to lead your shots by. Now if you can see on this clip as this guy's strafing, you've got to fire earlier as he's walking into your crosshair, and I'm showing you if you do it too late, obviously you're going to miss your shots. But this varies between different results really, because think of if you're further away, you've got to fire it earlier. If you're closer, you've got to fire it sooner, and then you've got to learn the travel times of the rocket launcher and the flak cannon as well. There's lots of things to consider. This is why projectile aiming is probably the hardest in the game. You've always got to be thinking ahead, and your enemy's not just going to strafe left and right like in this clip. They're going to be going all over the place to try and throw you off with your prediction. And what I like to do is that I like to send a test rocket or a test flak, fire one sort of in between where they're standing at the current moment, just to see which way they're going to dodge, and then I can sort of work off how much I need to lead by then. It's kind of weird. It's kind of just testing the waters to see which way they're going to go in their direction, and that usually can give you something to grasp onto with your aiming. So this clip is just showing you the effectiveness of the flak cannon at different ranges from long to short. And as you notice at long range, it's pretty useless. But what you will notice is that there is one piece of flak shot that always aims true center. So, if somebody's standing still, that's going to be all right, I suppose. But the more erratic somebody moves at long distance, the more likely you're going to hit somebody with those extra bits of flak that fly about. But even at relatively short range as well, you'll notice a lot of flat pieces still go around your opponent. But, if you're using your terrain correctly with walls, that might not be a problem. So by using the walls and the terrain around me, I can essentially double the size of my flak spread on my primary fire. So here, where I've paused it, you'll notice that the flak fire is actually coming in towards his right-hand side. And it's slightly off at the moment, but this is because if he happens to dodge or strafe back right, he's going to get a full load of flak in the face, so he's going to get hit by that no matter what. But if he happens to continue on his journey towards the left, the flak is going to bounce off the wall and hit him in the back no matter what. It's a lose-lose situation for him and a win-win for me. But essentially, we double the size of the flak spread, and we double our chances of hitting more of those flak shards. Now, when learning projectile weapons, one of the most key things to learn is the environment around you, whether it be the ceilings, the walls, the floor, or what else there is around you. They become the extension of the gun, essentially. You want to be aiming for the closest thing to your opponent, because direct hits with rocket launchers and flaks are always nice, but you want to be able to guarantee damage at all times. So you don't necessarily want to aim for those direct hits unless you can or know that you're going to get them. But really, you should be aiming for the nearest environmental object nearest to your opponent and trying to maximize your potential of landing guaranteed damage. Now, when firing upwards with a rocket launcher, it's pretty adventurous. You have very limited options usually. Going in for that direct rocket can be very difficult, and you're literally waiting for that luck for them to walk into the rocket like Pixel just did there. But again, that's very hit and miss. But what you should be doing is aiming around the environment where they're closest to and just guaranteeing damage that way. So I'm going to show you some actual gameplay when I actually played Pixel, And you can see what I'm thinking in terms of using the rocket launcher here. As you can see, I'm aiming towards all different parts of the map rather than aiming directly on Pixel himself. If he happens to walk into something, even better, but you know, I'm aiming to get guaranteed damage. I'm aiming at the ceiling, I'm aiming at the bottom end of this ledge, the side of the walls, anything to get some damage. Now, if you're ever fighting in this position where you're lower than the opponent and they've taken the high ground, rockets and flak tend to be not a great choice. They're out of position in this particular fight, and it's best to switch it up. A shock rifle here, a sniper rifle, pretty much any other gun apart from projectile weapons, as you lose that positional control and you're going to miss a lot of shots essentially. But if you had to pick between rockets or flak, in this situation, I'd pick the flak cannon purely for, you know, the primary fire. You can get some more instant hit going on there. It's quicker, it's faster, you're more guaranteed damage. But also the secondary fire on the flak has actually got a curved arc as well, so it's much easier to hit the floor or the surface or something on the top of that ledge. So this footage that I'm showing you right now is very similar to that high ledge I've just shown you. The same principle applies even for such a small ramp as this. I find hitting rockets incredibly difficult. I should be really switching weapon to maybe my link or my sniper rifle if the opponent is holding the upper ground. If the opponent was to come in the pit with me, that would be a different story. That would suit the situation, but if he's holding the high ground, you're always at a disadvantage if you're using a projectile weapon. So I'm going to try and do a quick rundown of good ways to use your rocket launcher or your projectile weapons in certain situations. When you're holding the high positions, flak and rockets are always amazingly good, especially if you have jump boots charging up with secondary rockets, even better, as you can see here. It's great for those enclosed spaces, you know, where people can't escape so easily. Even better so if you're charging up rockets or your grenades. You can have some great fun absolutely obliterating people with this. Now, a great habit to get into with rocket launchers and flak cannons is objective spamming. So the armor is up, I want to spam as much as I possibly can because I know the enemy is close by and really wants it. So continuously spamming that location until he makes the mistake of walking into it. There's also prediction spam. This is reading your enemy's objectives, knowing where they're going to go next. In this situation with Pixel when I hit him, I assume that he's going to go towards fire pads, pick up some armor and health again, and maybe the flak cannon. So I preemptively spam towards there and hit him square in the face with those rockets. But there could have been different scenarios that played out here. But luckily, this sniper hit told me where he wanted to go, because after he got hit, he didn't want to risk going towards the shock rifle again and went straight towards the fire pad and health and also that flak cannon. So I was able to predict his movements. Now, this takes a long time before you get this kind of game knowledge, but it's usually going to be objective based. People are always going to go for those shield belts, those armors and those weapons. So reading where they want to go or understanding which is their favorite weapon they'd like to go for is where you should be spamming towards. So if you're ever caught off guard, the enemy surprises you, it's great for those defensive moments as well. Spamming rockets behind you, just messing up their movement, getting bigger gaps away from the enemy, but yet enabling you to do a lot of damage at the same time. You should always be trying to think of different angles, different ways to use the terrain to your advantage, such as using the primary flak to shoot around corners. This is really useful if you don't want to commit to a fight. You can safely spam around corners, or if your opponent is just getting away and you want to do some damage, or if you feel the map's gone a little bit too quiet and you think somebody's trying to be very sneaky against you, just preemptively keep spamming places just so you can find out their location. Once the crosshair turns red, you know that you found them and you know they're behind that corner. Now, the flak cannon can really change the pace of a game if you play sneaky with it. It can do up to 180 odd damage instantly at point blank range. So if you hide behind a corner or you set up a trap, say waiting for somebody to take the 100 armor and then go to the shock rifle and be hidden around the corner like so, it can really change the pace of a game tremendously. That one shot can really throw the control into the other player's favor, and all it took was one flak shot. Now, rockets can't really do it the same way, purely for the fact that if you were to use a rocket point blank range, you're going to hurt yourself. And also the loading time and also the loading noise that rockets make is way too loud, and nobody's going to push you or come anywhere near that corridor once they hear you loading up. There is nothing more impressive than landing some awesome air rockets and making instantly a frag video afterwards, no doubt about it. But if you can help it, don't try and go for an air rocket if you have any other weapon that can deal with sort of big floating movement in the sky a lot easier. I mean, if there's no terrain to hit or you've got no other weapon, then an air rocket is really acceptable. That is, you know, a-okay, go for it. But if you do have that sniper rifle or shock rifle handy, make sure you switch, because you don't want to miss a damage opportunity like that. There's many times that I've seen people going for those air rockets and flake them out, and then they could have won a situation if they just switched to a sniper rifle. So bear that in mind. Always go for the easy shot. Go for the percentage win every time. But if you haven't got any other option, go for the air rocket. But air flak is a completely different story, guys. It's so easy to hit somebody floating in the air with primary flak. Secondary flak is exactly like air rockets. Don't attempt it. Always guarantee the damage. I've said it so many times already. Just always go for the percentage plays. Always make sure that you can guarantee some damage. 1 HP of damage is better than none. So bear that in mind. You know, air flak, primary air flak is absolutely amazing, and it's pretty much impossible to miss with it once you know how much to lead by. You just get it every time. So this is a clip of a game that me and Chumbo played, and I thought it showed a lot of dynamics of the rocket launcher pretty well here, and projectiles in general. So I'm just going to give you a quick run through of this clip in a little bit more detail now. So the shield belt is just about to spawn, and I suddenly hear Chumbo coming up behind me, so I start charging 3 rockets in anticipation that he's going to come around this corner and come up this ledge. Now, my rockets did fire a little bit too early, but the reason I aimed at the wall there is because I thought he would have gone up there towards the left, gone up to that wall on that safe perch, and hold that high ground while he shock rifled below. And I still thought he was going to do that, so this is why I kept charging my rockets. I was getting ready to fire another load up onto that top perch there, but he jumps down, which really confused me. I was waiting for him to hold the high ground and take the high position and zone me out a little bit. I just assumed that he thought I was going to go straight for the shield belt. This is why I think he committed to the combo a little bit too much, and it put himself in a really bad position because he essentially gives me an easy free shot where I can place a rocket at his feet, and this is going to send him flying into the air, exactly what I want, and this makes him very easy to predict on the next shot. So this is where it gets interesting. So my next rocket is pretty much guaranteed to land. I've noticed the flak coming out and it's heading towards me, so I want to dodge that as soon as I possibly can. But I've highlighted the back walls here because these are very significant in this particular moment in time, because Chumbo is landing in a precarious situation where he can't really dodge to his left so much because there's walls there, there's more terrain. It just gives me more ammunition to get splash damage against him. So he's thinking that the only sort of logical way to go here, and I'm thinking the same because I know exactly where he's landing. I know that if I was in that situation, I would want to get into a position where it was more open plan, where it's less likely to hit things against me with a rocket launcher. So I know that he's going to go towards the lift. So what I want to do here is dodge that ball and start aiming up towards that lift. So this is where I slightly misread the situation. I assume that if Chumbo gets on that lift and he survives this next rocket, that he's just going to go up behind the pillar and surrender the armor, let me have it, and try and survive out of the situation. But instead he jumps, throws me off a bit, and as you can see I have to really readjust my aim there. When you're trying for those air rockets, you really got to sort of predict way ahead and try and hit them directly. Of course I didn't hit him directly, I actually hit the wall, which is even better because really you've got to think about your environment, lads and lasses, don't ever forget. And yeah, I got a little bit lucky with the air rocket, but ideally in that situation, if I knew he was going to jump, I would have switched to a sniper or a shock rifle or something that would hit him in the air.